Today, we are going to dive into color in the Adobe Fresco app. Color is one of my favorite parts about being a digital illustrator. So in this episode, we're going to dive into the color picker and the color palette tools in Adobe Fresco. And I'm going to share with you my quick hack for bringing your Procreate color palettes into Adobe Fresco if you are in that process of converting from one app to the other. Welcome back to another episode of Adobe Fresco for Beginners, where I am breaking down the Adobe Fresco app and showing you everything you need to know, whether you are brand new to digital illustration and drawing on the iPad and want to get started using Adobe Fresco, or you have been drawing on your iPad for a while and are trying to switch over from another app and want to figure out how to do all of the things you know how to do in that other app inside in Adobe Fresco. I've already shared 2 episodes in this series. We've already done a full tour of the Adobe Fresco app, and we've looked at the feature that I think sets this app apart from all the other illustration and drawing apps out there, which is the brushes in Adobe Fresco. So if you have missed those, I will link the mini-series playlist up here. You can go back to episode 1 and start there and come back to this episode when you're ready. Today, however, we are going to dive into color in the Adobe Fresco app. Color is one of my favorite parts about being a digital illustrator. I love picking out colors. I have a very refined brand color palette. If you know me and you know my artwork, one of the most common things that I hear from people is that they recognized my illustrations because of my color palette. So when I was choosing whether or not to switch from Procreate over to Adobe Fresco, I needed to know that I was going to be able to have control over my color palette. So in this episode, we're going to dive into the color picker and the color palette tools in Adobe Fresco, and I'm going to share with you my quick hack for bringing your Procreate color palettes into Adobe Fresco if you are in that process of converting from one app to the other. So grab your iPads and let's dive into it. So one thing about Adobe Fresco is every time that you open up a new document, when you tap on your color tool, it's going to have reset all of your recents. So you won't see your recents from other canvases that you've created. But if you tap on this little all button and slide over here, you'll see some color palette options. So Fresco colors, you can download color palettes. So here's some that I've downloaded. To create a color palette, you can head on over here to your recents and click this plus button. It will add the color that you have already selected. So if I change the color that I've selected here and then press this plus button, it's going to add that pink color to the palette. If you have a color palette that you would like to manually add to your Adobe Fresco color palette, you can tap to open up the HSB sliders here. So you can find the hue, saturation, and brightness code for your color, then put that in to save it and then add it to your color palette. If you tap these 3 little dots beside the HSB sliders, you can switch that over to RGB. So maybe you are more familiar with RGB codes. Again, you can slide the colors to get particular RGB settings, or you can tap on it to put in a particular number. If you're used to hex codes, there are tons of hex color code to HSB or RGB converters online. So you can just Google that, put in your hex code, and then it will tell you the RGB settings or the HSB settings, depending on which one that you want to use. You can also find a color's HSB or RGB codes inside in Procreate. So if you're familiar with Procreate and you're switching over and you have particular colors or particular color palette that you already use and create in Procreate, you can just open up your Procreate, have a look at the color settings and info inside in Procreate, and then come back into Fresco and punch in the red, green, blue, or the hue, saturation, brightness settings. You can also manually select a color by moving around the color wheel here, and then choose the shade and tone by moving across the little classic color picker here in the middle. Then we've got these little quick settings here where we can jump to white by tapping on the white circle, or jump to black by tapping on the black circle. We can also create a transparency by tapping on the transparency circle, and then we can change the opacity of the brush color by sliding over and back on this opacity slider, and also add it to our color palette with that particular opacity setting. Inside our color wheel, we can also quickly access our color picker. At the moment, we don't have anything in our canvas, so let's go ahead and add some dots so that we can see how that will work. So then when we select that color picker and slide it around the canvas, it's going to pick up that color for us. And also over there in the top right hand corner, you'll see that it's showing me the RGB properties or the RGB code for the particular color that I'm sliding across. Once I let go, it's going to select that color and pick it up for my brush. And then I can also tap to add it to my color palette here in my recent colors. You'll also notice that as I pick up a color with my color picker tool, it automatically added it to my recent used colors. You don't have to come back and save it to the color palette that you're building because it automatically picks it up. That is all of the color palette tools here. We can also access the eyedropper tool from our tools menu here. So we can slide it around the canvas to pick up a color, or if you are working and you want to quickly pick up a color that you've already used, you can press and hold on your screen with your finger to quickly activate the color picker tool and then slide it anywhere on your document to select and pick up a color and add it to your brush. Now, if you are a Procreate user or a user of another digital illustration app and you want to quickly import a color palette, let me show you my quick hack from switching over from Procreate to Adobe Fresco to quickly bring in a color palette. You can use this for Procreate, you can use this for another app that you use for illustrating, you can use this with maybe your brand kit or a color palette that you have a saved file or image of. We're going to tap on the import or add image button here, and then we're going to tap on import it from a photo, not a file, because I have a screen grab of my Procreate color palette saved to my camera roll favorites. When I import this to my canvas, it's going to add it as a new layer here. And if I don't want it to be in the way of my illustration, I can actually drag this off my document or my artboard workspace area. And now it's out here in the edge, so I can still see it. I can still press and hold to pick up colors from it using the eyedropper or just that quick action of pressing and holding, but it's not actually on my document. So when I export and save, I'm not going to see this in my JPEG or my PNG. It's not going to be in my final saved file and I can still access it. This is another feature that I really love about Adobe Fresco, which kind of plays into what we might be familiar with in Adobe Illustrator, which is the space outside of that artboard or that document is usable. We can place things there, and then only what is on that white document artboard space is what gets saved when we export our file. But what's also really handy about this is obviously we can leave it over here for color picking, but if we tap back on our color circle here, what you'll see underneath our recent now is we have a color palette that is titled with the same title as our screen grab of our color palette from Procreate. And it has automatically created a color palette using the colors from this image. And now I can start to use the colors from my Procreate color palette really quickly. This also works if you want to create a color palette from an image. So maybe you have an inspiration image, or there's a particular color palette image that you saw on Pinterest that you'd like to bring in, or maybe you're creating an illustration or a piece of art based on a photo that you've taken. So you've got a reference photo. You can do exactly the same thing. You can tap to import a photo. You can take a photo directly with your iPad camera. You can import it from your files, or again, you can grab something from your camera roll. So let's go ahead and grab this artwork that I posted on Instagram this week. Again, we're going to drag it out here to the right because it is a reference image. Then we're going to click done, and we're going to go back over here to our color palette, and you'll see that we've now got another color palette with the title of that image that we brought in from our camera roll. And now we have all of the different colors from this particular image already in a color palette ready to go. Unfortunately, at the moment, there is not a way to save your color palettes that you import from images in Fresco so that when you open up a different document, you can access that color palette that you've already created. So my personal way that I've found around this is by having screen grabs of my color palettes, whether that's a color palette that I'm creating here in Fresco or one that I'm bringing over from Procreate, or a color palette that I've created in an artwork, or creating little swatch files. So for example, I have a swatch file in my camera roll favorites. Again, this is just a little swatch file of colors that I use quite often that I created in another Fresco document. I just saved that as a PNG to my camera roll. And then every time that I want that color palette, I just add it to my Fresco document. And then again, you'll see it creates an automatic palette based on that image. And then it also creates like these different shades of the main colors, but you'll see that it does grab those main colors in the image and then just populates out the palette with more colors. Hopefully Fresco is going to add a feature in the future where we can save the palettes that we've created so that we can access them in all of our Fresco documents, but at the moment that feature is not available, so this is my personal quick hack and way around it. This is really handy, as I've already said, if you are a Procreate user and you're switching over from Fresco and maybe you have a library of palettes that you've been building out over these years. Take a screen grab of all of your different palettes, save them to your camera roll, add them to your favorites so that they're really quick and easy to find. And then every time you start a new document here in Fresco, you can add those screen grabs to your document, and then Fresco will automatically populate a color palette inside in your color tool with the colors from that screen grab image. I hope that you found this color tool deep dive helpful and that it's getting you really excited about creating cute and colorful artwork with Adobe Fresco. If you found this video helpful, be sure to click that like button. It really helps these videos and this mini series reach more people who might be wanting to learn about Adobe Fresco. And if you haven't done so already and you're enjoying this Adobe Fresco mini series, be sure to click that subscribe button, and you can turn on that notification bell as well so that YouTube reminds you when I upload the next episode in the mini series. Speaking of the next episode in the series, we're going to be looking at some of the other tools in the Adobe Fresco app and doing a little bit of a deep dive on things like move and resize tool and all of those little things that you might know instinctively where they are in the apps that you're used to using but are struggling to figure out how to replicate your workflow and processes in Adobe Fresco. So that is what we're going to dive into next. But I would also love to hear from you guys if there is anything that you would like me to do a specific video on, if there is something that you are used to being able to do in Procreate or your another drawing app or another illustration app that you would like to learn how to do in Adobe Fresco or would like to know if it's possible to do in Adobe Fresco, go ahead and jump into the comments and let me know what your Adobe Fresco questions are. Troubleshoot with me what you're struggling to figure out how to do in Adobe Fresco, and we can chat about it there. And I will also do my best to plan more future episodes for this mini series to directly answer your questions and the things that you are struggling to figure out how to do in Adobe Fresco. If you enjoyed this video and you're getting excited about using Adobe Fresco, you might enjoy going back and watching my July live stream where I showed you how I create repeat patterns inside in Adobe Fresco. So be sure to check out that video if you're ready for something a little bit more advanced and you want to sink your teeth into that. I will chat with you guys in the comments and I will see you in the next episode.